Welcome, everybody, to the Cincinnati Reds Weekly show on the Gruely Truth Sports Network. I'm your host for Cincinnati Reds Weekly, Mike Goodpaster. And you may ask, why am I here? There's no games. Opening day has been pushed back, at least pushed back for a few weeks. And, I'm sure we could come with some Reds news, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to look back at a little bit of Reds history tonight. And it's been 30 years since the 1990 Cincinnati Reds shocked everybody in the baseball world and won the 1990 World Series. Now, I've been a Reds fan my whole life. The first team I remember would have been the 1975-76 Reds, the Big Red Machine. I'd have been 7 years old, I think, in 1975. Still remember watching that World Series with my parents and my sister, staying up till midnight and watching them lose to the Red Sox in Game 6 on the Carlton Fisk home run, and then coming back the next day, watching the Reds trail 3-0. Tony Perez hits the 2-run homer in the 6th inning. Joe Morgan with the game-winning single in the top of the 9th. Yastrzemski flies out to, was it Cesar Geronimo or George Foster? I get 75 and 76. I think it was the Foster, to win the World Championship. And for my money, the 75 and 76 Reds were the greatest team in baseball history. But if you ask me who my favorite Reds team was, I would say the 1990 Cincinnati Reds. And it's been, like I said, 30 years, amazingly, since the Reds went wire to wire, winning the 1990 World Series. It's been 30 years since the Reds started off the season by winning their first 9 games. They won 50 games at the All-Star break and 59 of their first 92 games overall en route to a National League West title. A 6-game victory over Pittsburgh in the NLCS, and then an improbable 4-game sweep of the vaunted Oakland A's to capture the franchise's 5th World Series title. The 1990 season was Lou Piniella's first as a manager. Piniella was taking over a team that had been through the tumult of the Pete Rose scandal in 1989, but had finished up as runners-up in the National League West 4 times in the previous 5 seasons. It was a talented team, and whether anyone wanted to believe it or not, in April, by late September, the Reds had won the franchise's first division title in 11 years. There's a lot to be remembered from 1990, and anyone who followed the team in that magical season will have their favorite memories. So I kind of brought up 10 that stuck out to me, and the 1990 season is a season where I probably attended half the regular season games, the NLCS, and it was a magical time to be a Reds fan. And if you look back, at the end of 76, the Reds traded away Tony Perez, which I think was the glue to the Big Red Machine. Didn't win anything after that. 77, 78, they came in second. 1979, John McNamara replaced the legend Sparky Anderson. Most Cincinnati Reds fans were upset about that. But the Reds did make the playoffs that year, getting swept by the Pittsburgh Steelers, We Are Family, Willie Stargell, Dave Parker, the team that went on to beat the Baltimore Orioles in 7 games. The Reds got swept in 3. Now, 1980, I think the Reds came in 3rd, but only a few games out, so it wasn't a bad season. 1981, the Reds had the best record of baseball, but get screwed over by a major league strike in a split season, and best record of, actually, that year, if you look it up, the 2 best records in baseball, or at least the National League, were the Reds and the Cardinals. And the Reds and Cardinals, neither one got to play in the divisional playoffs, as the Dodgers played the Astros in the NL West, and in the NL East, it was Philadelphia and Montreal. 1982, that competes for worst team that I've ever seen with the Reds. 83 was a little bit better. 84, a little bit better. And in August of 84, they brought Pete Rose in. The team kind of turned around, played much better, but couldn't get over the hump. That brings us to 1989, where Pete Rose gets in trouble. The team drops to 5th place. And you need a guy with this team to really kind of shake them up. And Lou Piniella was a hard-nosed guy that had played for the New York Yankees. Tough. I mean, a lot like Pete Rose about the gambling. And the 1990 season, my number one memory that sticks out there, not that it's the memory that sticks out the most, but just number one because it was the first one that happened, would have been April 9th, 1990, opening day against the Houston Astros. Now, not your normal opening day. First off, it was on the road. The Reds and Astros had played at the Astrodome because of a labor dispute that resulted in the owners locking out players of spring training for 32 days, which delayed the start of the season. Tom Browning got the start against Houston ace Mike Scott. Second baseman Mariano Duncan drove in the first runs of the season with a 2-run home run in the top of the second inning, but Houston answered with 4 runs in the bottom of the inning to put the Reds at a deficit. An RBI single by Duncan in the 6th tied the game at 4, and the Reds eventually won 8-4 in 11 innings, getting a 3-run triple by Barry Larkin with 2 outs to break the tie. The bolt-in combination of Tim Layana and Nasty Boys Norm Charlton, Rob Dibble, and Randy Myers combined to pitch 7 shutout innings with 11 strikeouts. It was the first of 9 straight wins to open the season, and this team would never look back. Now we jump forward a month to May 25th, 1990. Jack Armstrong pitched 8 strong innings, allowing just 3 hits and striking out 7 without a walk to lead the Reds to a 5-1 win at Montreal against the Expos. It was the 8th win in 9 decisions for Armstrong, who had won just 6 games in 21 previous starts with the Reds over the 2 previous seasons. Armstrong was 11-3 at the All-Star break and was actually the National League starter in a Midsummer Classic at Wrigley Field in Chicago. Armstrong won just 1 game after the All-Star break, but he got his chance to contribute in the postseason, and he contributed big time, delivering 3 shutout innings of relief when the Reds came from behind to beat Oakland in Game 2 of the World Series. A lot of people forget Jack Armstrong, for the first half of the season, was the best pitcher in the National League that year. And by the time you get to late August, early September, he's a relief guy. Now, we go to July 7th, 1990. This is, I think, just before the All-Star break. The Reds beat the Phillies 5-0. Rick Mailer pitched a 6-hit shutout, helped himself at the plate by going 1 for 3 with an RBI ground out in the 6th inning that gave the Reds their final run of the game. Now, this was significant because it gave the Reds their 50th win of the season, and there was still a game left before the All-Star break. So by the time we get to this point, I remember, I was, 22 years old? And even though I was that old, I was still counting it down like it was 10 on a little piece of paper. Started counting the magic number right after the All-Star break. July 23rd, 1990, there are 26 games over 500 with this win. Barry Larkin went 3 for 5 with 2 doubles, 2 runs scored, and 2 RBIs at a 9-2 win at San Diego. The victory pushed the record to a season high, 26 games over 500 at 59-33, and gave them an 11-game lead in the National League West standings over the second-place San Francisco Giants. It's pretty much all over but the shouting. If I remember right, the Reds were like a game under 500 the second half of the season, but they'd played so well the first half of the season it didn't matter. And I think the closest anybody got to the Reds in late August through the middle of September was 6 games. And then we had a rainy Saturday, September the 29th, 1990 at Riverfront Stadium. Now, there was rain, and there was enough rain to eventually force play between the Reds and Padres to be called after 6.5 innings, and San Diego had a 3-1 win. But this, in the end, would be a day of celebration. While the Reds and Padres were in a rain delay, San Francisco beat the Dodgers 4-3. That result clinched the National League West title for the Reds for the first time since 1979. They never trailed in the division the entire season, and for only 2 days did they share first place. Their lead never dropped below 3.5 games after May the 4th. So, for the first time in 11 years, the Cincinnati Reds were headed to the playoffs. And I remember I was sitting in the right field bleachers about halfway up. Yeah, it was not the greatest seats in the world, but I was there. And that game won. I think the Reds took like an immediate 3-0 lead. They ended up losing the game 4-3. And game 2 was the next day, and it was a day game. They actually played day games back then. They still do, I guess. But it was a day game, and Doug Drabek was the Pirates' best pitcher. And this is something where if the Reds lose this game and go down 2-0, it's probably all over but the shouting. But the Reds were up to the challenge. They beat the Pirates 2-1 to even the series. Browning gave up 1 run on 6 hits over 6 innings before turning the game over to Dibbles and Myers. Right fielder Paul O'Neill drove in both runs for the Reds and helped quell a Pirates rally with his arm. Now, O'Neill's flare single to right field in the first inning scored Larkin for the first run of the game. He doubled off the wall in left center in the fifth to bring home Herm Winningham with what proved to be the decisive run. The Pirates got their first two runners on base in the top of the sixth inning on singles by Andy Van Slyke and Bobby Bonilla, but O'Neill threw out Van Slyke at third base, attempting to tag up on a fly ball hit by Bonds for a double play. Browning struck out R.J. Reynolds to end the inning, and the Pirates didn't threaten again. But I will still claim, through the regular season, through the playoffs, there were two plays to me that really stand out when I look back at the 1990 Cincinnati Reds. Number one was a Sunday night against the Dodgers when, if you remember, Norm Charlton taking out Mike Sosa at the plate. It just kind of showed the grittiness and the determination of this team. And then that throw from Paul O'Neill. Without that throw, this game very well is 2-2, and the Reds could have still lost it and faced a 2-0 deficit. So Paul O'Neill, while most people consider him a New York Yankee, I still consider him a Cincinnati Red just because of Game 2 of the 1990 NLCS. Now, October 12th, 1990, the Reds were 3 outs away from the National League pennant and had Randy Myers on the mound to protect a 2-1 lead in Game 6 against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Myers was working his second inning and got Bonilla on a pop-up to Larkin at shortstop to start the ninth. He walked Bonds, however, to bring up Carmelo Martinez. Martinez had failed to get a sacrifice bunt down with two on and no one out in the seventh inning. But he wasn't bunting this time. Martinez hit a deep fly ball to right field that kept carrying and forced right fielder Glenn Braggs to the wall. Braggs found his way back to the warning track, took a short leap back into the wall with his glove raised above the top. Braggs came down with the ball, robbing Martinez of a home run that would have given Pittsburgh the lead. It was the final defensive gem of a series full of gems for the Cincinnati Reds. And this was a game in which the bench shared also heavily in the win. Braggs entered the game in the eighth inning. Ron Oster was part of a double switch in the top of the seventh inning, and he led off the bottom of the inning with a single to right. He scored what proved to be the series-deciding run on a single by pinch hitter Luis Quinones. Now, the other thing people forget is, the Reds played the Pirates in 70, 72, 75, 79 in the NLCS. The Reds won all but one of them. This series was as good as any of them, except for maybe 72, and it might have been as good for a complete series as 72 was, because this is a series where, almost every game's decided by one run. I think you had one blowout when the Reds blew the Pirates out in Pittsburgh, but it was an absolutely great series, and when you look at that series, it makes you wonder if the National League was just so much better than the American League, and because the American League wasn't that good, a loaded Oakland A's team may have been overrated because the competition they played wasn't that good. If you remember the 1990 ALCS, the Oakland A's swept the Boston Red Sox, and it wasn't even close. It sets up for Davis versus Goliath, October the 16th, 1990. Game 1 of the World Series at Riverfront Stadium. The Reds were in the World Series for the first time in 14 years. The first time since the Big Red Machine swept the New York Yankees in 1976 to win back-to-back titles. They're facing the Oakland A's, the defending world champions, who were prohibitive favorites behind the star power of left fielder Rickey Henderson and Bash brothers Jose Canseco, Mark McGuire. This is a team that had Carney Lansford. This team was loaded. The A's had swept San Francisco in 1989 and had swept Boston, as I just talked about, to win their first AL pennant. Any sense of Oakland invincibility was wiped out in the bottom of the first inning when Eric Davis drove a 2-run home run deep to center field with 2 outs against Dave Stewart. The Reds went on to beat the A's 7-0 behind Jose Rijo's 7 shutout innings, but it was Davis's home run in the first inning that not only set the tone for the game, but for the entire series. Now, October 17th, 1990. The Reds send Danny Jackson, who had helped Kansas City win the 1985 World Series title, to the mound in Game 2 against Cy Young Award winner Bob Welch. Jackson didn't make it through the third inning as Oakland built a 42 lead, but the Cincinnati bullpen of Scott Scudder, Jack Armstrong, Norm Charlton, Rob Dibble shut the A's out the rest of the game to give the Reds a chance to come back. That's what they did, scoring single runs in the fourth and the eighth to force extra innings. Against closer Dennis Eckersley, who was considered invincible, the Reds won the game in the 10th with some of the most unlikely players that you could ever imagine. Davis led off the inning with a ground out. Billy Bates, who was acquired from Milwaukee along with Glenn Braggs in the middle of the season, came up as a pinch hitter for Dibble. Bates fell behind 2 strikes, but reached on an infield single to third base, and it was a dribbler. Chris Sabo followed with a solid single to left field to move Bates to second base. Catcher Joe Oliver, who was a .231 hitter in the regular season, was just 4 for 22 in the postseason at that point, came to the plate. Oliver pulled Eckersley's 0-1 pitch over the third base bag, hitting the foul line for a single that scored Bates and gave the Reds a 5-4 win and a 2-0 series lead. Now, Game 3 was the Chris Sabo game. He hits a couple home runs, but the thing I remember is, even going into Game 4, there were still people that did not believe this. There were people that thought that the Reds still weren't going to be able to win the series. But Jose Rijo was more dominating in Game 4 than he had even been in Game 1. Now, he allowed a run in the first inning and then 2 walks in the second. Rijo retired 20 batters in a row before giving way to Myers with 1 out in the ninth. The Reds had rallied to take the lead in the 8th inning with 2 runs off of Stewart, and now Myers was called upon to close up the World Championship. And that's exactly what he did, getting Canseco to ground out to Sabo at third base, and then getting Carney Lansford on a foul pop-up to first baseman Todd Benzinger. Wire to wire was complete. The 1990 Cincinnati Reds were the world champions. That was 30 years ago. And now 30 years later, we're still waiting on another World Series. But I have a good feeling that maybe this is the year if we ever start the season. And with the way things have been going, I don't know. I think we'll be back playing baseball by May or so. And I think this is a team that can make that 1990 team proud. I'm excited. I want you guys to make sure you go follow me at The Grueling Truth. If this stays like this with no spring training baseball and no news, if you guys want to hear it, send me a message at Grueling Truth and let me know that you like the historical stuff. Maybe we could do some stuff on the 1940 Reds, the 1970 Reds, 72, 73, 75, 76, 79, 1999. But whatever you want to hear, you send me a message and we'll do it. But for now, this has been Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to the Cincinnati Reds Weekly Show on The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.